Hi, folks. Bit of an add-on regarding genetic markers, and if you're considering perhaps getting a genotype 23andMe, you see those little piglets running across the yard. Having a look at our picture here from our book of genetic markers. So if you do elect to get your genetic tree done, 23andMe, etc., be aware that they will be looking for these kinds of things. And the bulk of their money probably doesn't come from people paying to have their genetic information sent to them. Some of these companies sell, legally or not, they sell people's medical information, such as this, to guess who would like it? Insurance companies. And insurance companies have long been in the business of seeking people's medical information so they can save money by knowing who will be more or less of a risk to insure. Illegal practices in the buying and selling of medical records have gone on for decades. So just be aware that just as your data of your net usage is harvested by Google and Facebook and sold to industry, so are your medical records. So if you do get your genome done, say just out of curiosity, genealogy or something, just be advised that it's possible some of these companies make the bulk of their money, their bread and butter, by selling your information to third parties, and you no longer have control of that. So it not only exposes your DNA, like from the inside out, but you need to understand that it looks also before and after you in your family tree, and laterally out to something like second cousins. So you're essentially revealing a large swath of your family genetics, not just your own. So that's just something to realize there. So when I had a health insurance company that wanted lab data on me before they decided to give me health insurance, so if I passed, my wife would have something to live on besides her income. She's a strong worker, takes care of herself, but still, I contribute some. They wanted to know what risks I had. They could discover from my medical records I had malignant melanoma, but there are a whole bunch of other things that might be hiding in my genes that nobody knows about. And there have been cases where people have been excluded from insurance because of the genetics that they had or were thought to have had. And that's a real problem. So when I applied for the health insurance, life insurance, and they wanted lab data, they wanted me to go to their people and draw my blood and so forth. And if I worked for the insurance company, I would immediately take those biological samples and probe them for genetic markers such as these, so that they could adjust their rates accordingly, dependent on the risk of that individual. So I knew that insurance companies want that information. And they have a lot of money. It's a big industry. They hire smart people. There are plenty of people who are clever and figure things out. And if I worked for one of these companies, I would figure out if somebody had mailed in, well, if they had their labs done at my physician, I would just get the physician to run this and get it directly. But if the person was cautious, like I was, and said, tell me what data you want, I'll get an independent lab to do it and send you the data, which is what I did. Then they still could have gotten this genetic information from me had I not been conscious, and had I licked the envelope or the stamp and sealed it. A clever person at that company could remove that, get the DNA from where I licked, and get all this information. That's possible now with PCR. It's been possible for a while. If you've ever seen the movie Gattaca, you'll get a sense of what might be going on. Now, this was science fiction, but Gattaca had this fellow played by, I think it was Ethan Hawke, who was faking it to become one of the genetically elite. But he eventually got caught. So 23 and me, you're opening yourselves up to a lot of exposure. And again, not just you, but before you and behind you, your family tree, like your grandparents, your grandkids, second cousins. That's a lot. So you might want to guard your biodata. So when so when I sent the envelope to the insurance company with the lab information that they wanted to insure me, I sealed it, not with my tongue, which they could extract my DNA from the cells in there, but I sealed it with a kitchen sponge, which I don't know if you know this, but is choked with bacteria, probably one of the most disgusting objects in a house. And you know, if they were going to go ahead and try to steam off the stamp or the envelope seal and sequence those data, good luck with that. Kitchen sponge data, that's bound to be interesting. So that's just a thought. Okay, one more idea. I did ask you to look into things that can cause mutations. I do have a paper I'd like to get to you all by Bruce Ames, who developed an assay for mutations called the Ames assay. So maybe you can look that up, the Ames assay for mutations and mutagens. So I have an article by Bruce Ames, the author, the creator of this assay himself, that thinks that maybe people have gone a little wild in using his assay and making assumptions based on that, and looking at things that generally are recognized as safe, like wine and oregano, come up as mutagenic in the Ames assay. So there's some cautions there. So look into mutations, and there's a difference. Mutagen does not equal carcinogen. So I'll even write that down, and you should too. Mutagen, that's a substance that causes mutations, is not the same as carcinogen. Carcinogen, that's a substance that causes cancer. So they're not equal. All right, another thing, and this is kind of on the fun side of things, is here's a picture of the chromosome, and it has parts, and it's got this part called the centromere, so that's, some of it is structural, and then these arms, the chromatids, and those are the, remember, highly folded DNA, where 2 meters of DNA are squeezed down into like 23 of these, or 46. But I want to point out these telomeres here at the end. So telomeres are interesting and have gained some attention because they're sort of like the cap on a shoelace. As a shoelace has a little plastic cap, and these telomeres, let's zoom in here, they act a little bit like protective caps on the chromatids. And as we age, they get shorter as we age. And eventually they wear away. And when they wear away, then the DNA starts to frazzle. And when the telomeres are gone, then aging sets in a big way. So without telomeres, then DNA unravels, to put it prosaically, and from that, when telomeres are gone, when that happens, then that leads to senescence. So that's off screen, Captain. So that's like aging, and it accelerates quickly. So they have found the genes for telomerases, and they gave mice extra copies of telomerase. And they had 2 genetically identical groups of mice, one with extra telomerase than the other. And the telomerase added mice had kept their telomeres longer, and they lived about twice as long. And at the same age, they showed the two mice and the control mice without added telomeres, where they were bald, fat, and just sitting around. Their coats lost their gloss. They were overweight. They weren't playing. And the other mice were running around, sleek coats and slim and frisky and playing and having a great time. So everyone was going, we want some telomeres. So, but the problem with that is careful what you wish for, because if the telomeres are kept alive forever, cells, they're kept alive forever, that's the ideology of a cancer cell. So be careful. There is a thing that cells need to do, and that's eventually grow old and die and be replaced by young, healthy cells. And if that doesn't happen, then the whole animal degrades. So there's a term for that. You can also look up this term, apoptosis. Apo is like preceding, like apoenzyme, and then tosis is with a silent P, basically means like drooping or decay. So before decay. So it's like programmed cell death. So cells are sort of programmed to only last a certain while, and then they're programmed to self-destroy. And that's actually important. Cells that live forever, if you cut out apoptosis, that's what a cancer cell does. And by the way, people, even experts in the field, just can't resist the POP connection in the middle there. And everyone and their 9 cats call it apoptosis. But if you cover up the apo, like we had apoenzyme, the P is silent. Tosis means like drooping or sagging. And it's a condition still used in medicine to describe like a drooping eyelid. There's some interesting stories in medical history. There are other words that start with P, like pneumonia, or pneumatic, have a silent P in the front. But everyone, once it's put a vowel in front of it, nobody can resist the pop, perhaps because they had snap, crackle, pop cereal as a child. But look into these two things. Look these words up, senescence and apoptosis. And telomeres have a role there. And without apoptosis and with ever-present telomeres, you can have immortal cells. But what those can be is cancer. So be careful what you wish for. It's not as simple as we might think. But those are some happy, frisky mice with those extra telomeres. And there are other things we can do to keep our cells healthy. Keep moving, avoid crowds for now, and the COVID, and be well. Talk to you later.